Hello, muito bem-vindo, muito bem-vinda à aula número 79, ao vivo aqui pelo YouTube. A aula de hoje nós falaremos sobre o livro The Mountain is You, parte 13, e tem uma mensagem no chat da Berenice. Hello, teacher. How are you? I'm great. How are you? How are you? Na primeira segunda-feira do segundo mês do ano. Então, hoje é a primeira segunda-feira de fevereiro. Janeiro foi, tem gente que acha que janeiro demorou, tem gente que acha que janeiro foi muito rápido. E aí, na sua opinião, janeiro demorou ou janeiro foi muito rápido? Independente se para você tiver demorado ou se tiver passado muito rápido, é muito legal pensar que tudo que você dedicou ao longo do mês de janeiro, você desenvolveu e melhorou. Tudo que você deixou de dedicar, você deixou de desenvolver e de melhorar e provavelmente até piorou em algumas coisas. Então, com isso a gente entende que tudo que você treina, você acaba ficando bom, melhorando, desenvolvendo. E o mesmo vai ao contrário. Tudo que você não faz, você vai piorando. Tem até uma análise muito legal chamada de 1%, quer ver? Que what happens if I improve by 1%? Então, se você demorar, se você desenvolver 1% por dia, olha, essa daqui que é a equação que eu quero mostrar para vocês. Deixa eu abrir no... Não, pode ser só no separador. Aí. Abrir imagem no separador. Então, o que fala nessa teoria é que se você melhorar 1% todo dia, então 1,01 vezes 365, você melhora 37,38% por ano. E se você piorar 1% por dia, você vai ficar 0,03, você vai perder, né, 0,03 da sua habilidade. Duas coisas interessantes. Primeiro é que se você não fizer nada, você vai perder, mas não tanto quanto você deixaria de desenvolver se você estivesse fazendo alguma coisa de fato. Então aqui, se você piorar, você piora quantidade X, mas se você melhora, você consegue melhorar exponencialmente ao longo desse processo. Então, por isso que... eu estou falando isso por causa... Até me perdi, entrei na teoria do 1% e fui nela. Mas eu estou falando isso porque hoje já é a primeira segunda-feira do segundo mês do ano. Então, se você tiver desenvolvido, se você tiver melhorado ao longo do último ano, do último mês, você desenvolveu e você conseguiu ganhar algum desenvolvimento, alguma habilidade nova durante esse tempo. E se você está aqui assistindo essa aula é porque você está, de fato, investindo seu tempo e dedicando em aprender mais, em desenvolver e crescer em inglês. Então vamos nessa. Nós estamos na sequência do livro The Mountain is You, que é esse livro aqui. Hoje nós estamos na part 13, na parte 13. E a última página que nós lemos na semana passada foi a página 100 e 101. Aqui, ó, nós lemos 100, dividindo aqui com a 101. E aí nós entramos hoje no capítulo 4, chapter 4. Isso aí. Que a gente falou, build healthier, more balanced and fulfilling life. Então hoje nós estamos começando o capítulo 4, so let's go. Lembrando que a gente está fazendo uma leitura dinâmica, com alguns comentários, e especialmente nas últimas 2 semanas, especialmente na última semana, a gente investiu mais tempo ainda nessa leitura dinâmica do que na explicação em si. Então, a ideia é te entregar um conteúdo de qualidade para você praticar inglês e desenvolver com algo que vai te ajudar, além do inglês em si. So, let's go. E fechou. Na página que nós estamos hoje é na página 103. Excelente. So, let's go. Chapter 4. This theory is very interesting, the 1% theory, a Berenice disse. Could you send me this PDF book, please? Absolutely. I'll send it to you on WhatsApp. Então, vou enviar o link o arquivo desse livro aqui lá no nosso grupo de alunos do WhatsApp. Que aí todo mundo tem acesso a ele. So let's go. Building emotional intelligence. Self-sabotage is ultimately just a product of low emotional intelligence. To move on with our lives in a healthy, productive, and stable way, we need to understand how our brains and bodies work together. We need to understand how to interpret feelings, what different emotions mean, and what to do when we are faced with big, daunting sensations that we don't know how to handle. We are going to specifically focus on aspects of emotional intelligence that relate to self-sabotaging behaviors. Though there is an incredible body of work on EI. EI is emotional intelligence from experts around the world that is continually growing with time. Basicamente, a self-sabotage, ou seja, a autossabotagem, ela é um produto de low emotional intelligence, então de baixa inteligência emotional. What is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, interpret, and respond to our emotions in an enlightened and healthy way. People with high emotional intelligence are often able to better get along with different types of people, feel more contentment and satisfaction in their everyday lives, and consistently take time to process and express their authentic feelings. Mostly, though, emotional intelligence is the ability to interpret the sensations that come up in your body and understand what they're trying to tell you about your life. The root of self-sabotage is a lack of emotional intelligence, because without the ability to understand ourselves, we inevitably become lost. These are some of the most misunderstood aspects of our brains and bodies that inevitably leave us stuck. Your brain is designed to resist what you really want. Something interesting happens in the human brain when we get what we want. When we imagine what goals we want to achieve, we often do so with the expectation that they will elevate our quality of life in some tangible way. And once we have arrived at that place, we will be able to coast, to settle down, to be good. Coast as in let go, relax into life, let things be for a while. That is not what happens. Neurologically, when we get something we really want, we just start to want more. New research in the nature of the chemical dopamine, which was previously believed to be the driving force behind desire, lust, and acquisition, proves that it is more complex than previously thought. In the molecule of more, Daniel Z. Lieberman explains that experts who studied the hormone found that when an individual was introduced to something they highly desired, the dopamine surge would diminish after acquisition. Dopamine, it turns out, is not the chemical that gives you pleasure. It is the chemical that gives you the pleasure of wanting more. So, the big, huge goal that you're working towards, you get there. And then there will be another mountain to scale. This is one of the many reasons that we deeply sabotage what we truly want. We know instinctively that arriving won't really give us the ability to abstain from life. It will only make us hungrier for more. Sometimes we don't feel up to that challenge. So, while we're on the way, a toxic cocktail of neurological biases start piling up on one another. And we start to resent, judge, and even vilify the objects of our greatest desire. What happens when we start to chase what we really want? We resist doing the work that it takes to actually get it because we are so afraid of not having it. Any brush with failure makes us rescind our effort and tense up. When we when we go so long not having what we really want, we create subconscious associations between having it and being bad because we have judged others for having it. When we get it, we fear losing it so badly that we push it away from ourselves so as to not have to withstand the pain. We are so deeply enmeshed in the mental state of wanting, we cannot shift to a state of having. First, we are relying on some goal or life change to save us in some unrealistic way. Any incident of failure will trigger us to stop trying. For example, if we are absolutely certain that a romantic partner will help us stop being depressed, we are going to be extremely sensitive to rejection because it makes us feel as though we will never get over depression. Of course, the obvious issue here is that dating is a process of trial and error. You have to fail first to succeed. Okay. Oh, one thing. Let me just do one thing very quickly. Só fazer uma coisa aqui bem rapidinho. Coloquei aqui page 103. Let me just do page. We're still on page 103. Just add a screenshot to help you guys see where we are in the classes document. Okay. Here, page 103 and 104. Também adicionar. Where is it? Então, enquanto eu estou pegando o screenshot aqui, uma coisa que ela falou muito interessante que eu não sabia, que eu aprendi no livro, é que dopamina, que a gente provavelmente você já ouviu falar, que é a dopamina, ela é conhecida como a substância que está relacionada com a satisfação, com o prazer, com o que é bom. Só que o que os pesquisadores acharam, que na verdade a dopamina não é isso, ela é a substância aqui, ó, it is the chemical that gives you the pleasure of wanting more. Seria assim, é a substância química natural do corpo que te dá desejo de ter mais, ou seja, uma loucura. Então, quando você tem um objetivo, você alcança ele, você normalmente duplica ele, né? Sei lá. So, allow ourselves. Any change, matter positive. Where am I? To coast. Okay, we're here. Of course, the obvious issue here is that dating is a process of trial and error. You have to fail first to succeed. Then we have this one. Then, for all the time we spend not having the thing we want, such as a romantic relationships, our brains have to justify and validate our stance in life as a form of self-protection. This is why we unconsciously vilify those who do have what we want. Instead of being inspired by their success, we doubt them. We become a skeptic about relationship. Being so jealous of others' happiness, we assume that they must be faking it, or that love isn't real, or that they will split eventually anyway. If we hold tightly to these beliefs for long enough, guess what will happen when we finally get the relationship we really want? Of course, we're going to doubt it and assume it will also fail. This is what's going on when people push others away or give up on their dreams the moment something challenging comes up. When we are scared that we are going to lose something, we tend to push it away from ourselves first as a mean of self-preservation. So let's say that you work through the limiting belief that are creating this much resistance in your life. And you do eventually allow yourself to build and have the thing you really, really want. Next, you'll be upon the last and most trying challenge, which is the shift from survival mode to thriving mode. If you have spent the majority of your life in a state in which you're just getting by, you are not going to know how to adapt to a life in which you are relaxed and enjoying it. You're going to resist it, feel guilty, perhaps overspend on disregards responsibilities. You are in your head balancing out the years of difficulty with years of complete relaxation. However, this is not how it works. When we are so deeply enmeshed in a feeling of wanting, it becomes extremely hard to adjust to the experience of having. This is because any change, no matter how positive, is uncomfortable until it is also familiar. Ou seja, toda mudança que a gente tem, mesmo que seja para melhor, ela é desconfortável até o momento que ela se torna familiar. Então, as mudanças na nossa vida, muitas vezes, a própria mudança em si ela é desconfortável, porque é uma mudança. a uma coisa nova, ainda que seja uma coisa, quote unquote, positive, que seja uma coisa legal. It's difficult to acknowledge the ways in which we are so deeply inclined to self-validate, so we end up standing in our own way out of pride. It is even more difficult to acknowledge that very often the things we envy in others are fragments of our deepest desires, the ones we won't allow ourselves to have. Yes, your brain is predisposed to want greater things and more of them. But by understanding its processes and tendencies, you can override the programming and start governing your own life. Nice. Ou seja, o que ele fala é que basicamente nosso cérebro ele é programado para querer sempre mais. Só que quando a gente entende como é que ele funciona, a gente consegue e que programar ele de alguma forma que faça sentido para o tipo de vida que a gente quer ter. This, okay. So let's see, page 109. Vamos lá, página 109 agora. Your body is governed by a homeostatic impulse. Your brain is built to reinforce and regulate your life. Your subconscious mind has something called a homeostatic impulse, which regulates functions like body temperature, heartbeat, and breathing. Brian Tracy explained it like this. Through your autonomic nervous system, your homeostatic impulse maintains a balance among the hundreds of chemicals in your billions of cells so that your entire physical machine functions in complete harmony most of the time. But what many people don't realize is that just as your brain is built to regulate your physical self, it tries to regulate your mental self. Your mind is constantly filtering and bringing to your attention information and stimuli that affirm your pre-existing beliefs. This is also known as psychology as confirmation bias, as well as presenting you with repeated thoughts and impulses that mimic and mirror what you've done in the past. Your subconscious mind is the gatekeeper of your comfort zone. Gatekeeper seria tipo o porteiro, que tá falando assim, a sua 1 second, there we go. Então a sua subconscious mind, o seu subconsciente, ele é o gatekeeper, ele é o que bloqueia, o que guarda, o que protege ali a sua área de conforto, uma área onde você não cresce porque você está confortável. E até um pouco contra-intuitivo, né? Mas uma coisa legal de observar. Ok. It is also the realm in which you can either habituate yourself to expect and routinely seek the actions that would build and reinforce the greatest success, happiness, wholesomeness, wholeness, sorry, or healing of your life. What this teaches us is that when we're going through a healing or changing process in our lives, we have to allow our bodies to adjust to their new state of normalcy. This is why all change, no matter how good, will be uncomfortable until it is also familiar. This is also why we can't get stuck in self-destructive habits and cycles. Even though they feel good, that doesn't mean they're good for us. Alright? Então, basicamente, por isso que quando a gente desenvolve um hábito bom, um hábito ruim, mas que ele é tipo assim, ele parece que é bom, mas na verdade ele é autodestrutivo, tipo, sei lá, fumar. Ele tem uma sensação boa, o hábito que a gente desenvolve, seja ele positivo ou não, porque ele é familiar. É isso que a gente tenta trazer para vocês com o inglês. É a questão do treinar todo dia, do teu contato contínuo, de estar com o inglês presente todos os dias, tem esse objetivo de tornar familiar, porque isso torna mais fácil, ou torna, às vezes, até possível, se for um caso mais complicado. Se for, dependendo do que for, né? No caso do inglês, torna mais fácil esse processo. Right? So we cannot live being governed by how we feel, or emotions are temporarily and do not always reflect on reality. You don't change in breakthroughs, you change in microshifts. So let's understand it. Okay. So you don't change in breakthroughs, you change in micro shifts. Que seria, você não muda num rompimento, assim, uma coisa repentina. Você muda em passos pequenos, em micro shifts. Okay. Page 110. Nice. Let's go. Existing. And then it says, breakthroughs do not happen spontaneously. They are tipping points. Ou seja, os breakthroughs, os rompimentos da nossa vida, esses momentos ímpares, assim, coisas que acontecem de vez em quando, não são coisas que acontecem todos os dias, não são coisas que acontecem do dia para a noite também. São coisas que acontecem de forma espontânea. Não são coisas que acontecem de forma espontânea, são pequenos processos, tipping points. Então, eles são a parte ali, depois de muito processo, que acontece um breakthrough. Revelations occur when ideas that were sitting in the margin of your mind finally get enough attention to dominate your thoughts. These are clicking moments. The moments when we finally understand advice you've heard your entire life. The moment when you've habituated yourself to a pattern of behavior for long enough that it becomes instinctively. A mind-blowing singular breakthrough is not what changes your life. Your life. A micro shift is. That's so nice. That's amazing. I'm going to use that one today in our exercise at the community. Até mandar aqui no nosso grupo do Telegram essa frase. Page. Nice. So, breakthroughs, isso aqui quer falar assim, ó, um momento único ali de breakthrough, de rompimento, de, nossa, tive uma experiência sinistra. Tive uma imersão 24 horas de inglês de um final de semana, de um dia, sei lá. E não é isso que vai mudar a sua vida com relação ao inglês. Mas uma pequena mudança de dentro da sua vida, ela pode ter um impacto maior do que esse grande evento. Isso acontece em tudo. Então, assim, sei lá, vou ir na academia 16 vezes por semana. Vou ir todo dia, 2 vezes por dia. Isso não necessariamente vai resolver seu problema, porque você vai um dia só, 2 dias, depois para. A mesma coisa com o inglês. So let's continue. Breakthroughs are what happen after hours, days, and years of the same mundane, monotonous work. But a mind-blowing singular breakthrough is not what changes your life. A micro shift is. So it repeats the same information 2 times because it's very important. I'm even going to copy it again. I'll paste it in here again. Okay. As writer and media strategist Ryan Holiday has noted, epiphanies are not life-altering. It's not radical moments of actions that give us long-lasting, permeating changes. It's the restructuring of our habits. The idea is what science philosopher Thomas Kuhn dubbed as paradigm shift. Kuhn suggested we don't change our lives in flashes of brilliance, but through a slow process in which assumptions unravel and require new explanations. It's in these periods of flux that microshifts happen and breakthrough level changes begin to take shape. Think of microshifts as tiny increments of change in your day-to-day life. A microshift is changing what you eat for one part of one meal just one time. Then it's doing that a second time and a third time before you even realize what's happening. You've adopted a pattern of behavior. What you do every single day accounts for the quality of your life and the degree of your success. It's not whether you feel like putting in the work, but whether or not you do it regardless. This is because the outcome of life are not governed by passion. They're governed by principles. You may not think what you did this morning was important, but it was. Yes, it was. You may not think what the little things add up, but they do. Consider the age-old brain teaser. Would you rather have 1 million in hand today or a penny that doubles in value every day for the next month? The 1 million right now sounds great, but after a 31-day month, that 1 penny would be worth over 10 million. Really? Wow. Olha que loucura isso aqui, ó. Pergunta: você preferiria ter US$ 1 milhão na mão hoje ou um penny? Penny é uma moeda. Essa moeda aqui, olha. Então, as moedas nos Estados Unidos, elas têm nome. Então, um penny, ele é 1 cent. Então, coin names. Essas aqui são as principais, né? Quarter, nickel, dime and penny. Mas aí o que o livro está falando é que se você tiver um penny por dia durante o próximo mês, o mês de 31 dias, e você dobrar esse. Então, por exemplo, hoje um penny, tomorrow two. Aí no outro dia, four. Pois no outro dia, eight. Pois no outro dia, 16. Pois no outro dia, 32. Essa soma composta, ela gera mais de 10 milhões. Então é melhor one penny for a month. Making big, sweeping changes is not difficult because we are flawed, incompetent being. It's difficult because we are not meant to live outside of our comfort zones. If you want to change your life, you need to make tiny, nearly undetectable decisions every hour of every day until those choices are habituated. Then you just continue to do them. If you want to spend less time on your phone, deny yourself the chance to check in one time today. If you want to get healthier, drink half a cup of water today. If you want to sleep more, go to bed 10 minutes earlier tonight that you did last night. Okay. If you want to exercise more, do it now just for just 10 minutes. If you want to read one page. If you want to meditate, do so for 30 seconds. Then keep doing those things. Do them every single day. You get used to not checking your phone. You want more water, you drink more water, you run for 10 minutes, and you won't feel like you have to stop. So you read one page, grow instead, and read another. At our most instinctive psychological level, changes translates to something dangerous and potentially life-threatening. No wonder why we built our own cages and stay in them, even though there is no lock on the door. Trying to shock yourself into a new life isn't going to work, and that's why it hasn't yet. You don't need to wait until you feel like changing to start changing. All you need is to make one micro shift at a time and then let the energy and momentum build. That's really good. Esse parágrafo aqui foi um dos mais interessantes até agora. Esse trecho desse parágrafo. You don't need changes in breakthroughs, you don't change in breakthroughs, you change in micro shifts. Super interessante. Que é a ideia de você não muda com uma mudança super, mega, ultra radical. Você muda com pequenas mudanças. So let's see this one. Your mind is anti-fragile. Page 13, 114. Is your brain the greatest antagonist in your life? Is irrational fear at the core of the majority of your greatest stressors? Do you ever have the hunch that you're almost seeking out problems, creating issues where they don't exist? Over creating, overthinking, and catastrophizing. If you said yes to these continuous, if you said yes to these, congratulations, you're self aware. You're, you're also just like anybody else. All right. If you feel like you're always subconsciously scanning your life through to identify the next thing to worry about, the next potential threat to fear, you'll be right. What we fear most is what our mind identify as the least likely threat that we cannot control. The threat is highly likely, we don't fear it. We respond to it. That's why most worries comes from not just identifying the one thing we cannot control, but the one small unlikely thing um, we cannot control. Nice. So why do our minds need this though? Can just enjoy what we have and be grateful? To a point, absolutely. But our minds, uh, but our minds also need adversity, and that's why it's instinctual to keep creating problems, even if there aren't any real ones in front of us. The human mind is something called anti fragile, which means that it actually gets better with adversity. Ups, então peraí, vamos pausar aqui. Isso aqui foi loucura. The human mind is something called anti fragile, which means that it actually gets better with adversity. Então, olha que doideira. Então, assim, ó, a mente humana ela é chamada de anti-fragile, ela é antifrágil. Significa, which means, que significa that it actually gets better with adversity. Que significa que, na verdade, ela melhora com a adversidade. Isso aqui já é loucura demais, você tá doido. Que interessante. O exemplo aqui, olha. Like a rock that becomes a diamond under pressure, or an immune system that strengthens after repeated exposure to germs, the mind requires stimulation in the form of a challenge. Então, olha que legal. É tipo um diamante, uma pedra que se torna um diamante pela pressão, ou um sistema imunológico que se desenvolve depois de uma certa exposição aos germes. A mente ela funciona da mesma forma. Quando ela é exposta à diversidade, ela desenvolve. Da hora, né? Por isso que quando a gente sai desse lugar de conforto, a gente consegue desenvolver. Como o livro vem falando ao longo de toda essa jornada aqui do livro. Let's continue because this chapter is nice. Very good. If you deny and reject any kind of real challenge in your life, Your brain will compensate by creating a problem to overcome. Except this time, there won't be any rewards at the end. It will just be you battling for it will just be you battling you for the rest of your life. The cultural obsession with chasing happiness, shielding oneself from anything triggered, and the idea that life is primarily good and any challenge we face is a mistake of fate are, are what actually weakens us mentally. Shielding the mind from any adversity makes us more vulnerable to anxiety, panic, and chaos. Those who can't help but create problems in their minds often do so because they have seized creative control of their existence. They move onto into the passenger's seat thinking that life happens to them rather than being a product of their actions. Who wouldn't be afraid if that who wouldn't be afraid if that were the case? All right. So just one thing que eu quero falar, a obsessão cultural em buscar a felicidade bloqueando a mente da pessoa de qualquer tipo de trigger, de qualquer coisa que possa é, gerar algum possível desafio, e a ideia de que a vida ela é boa e que nenhum desafio ele deve ser encarado, é um erro que, na verdade, deixa a gente fraco mentalmente. Super interessante. Ela está falando ainda sobre Our mind is anti-fragile. So cool. Those who can't help but create problems in their minds, oops, that one we read, so who wouldn't be afraid that if it was the case? But what most people don't tell you is that adversity makes you creative. It activates a part of us that is often latent. It makes things interesting. Part of the human narrative is wanting something to overcome. The trick is keeping it in balance, choosing to exit your comfort zone and endure pain for a worthy cause. Focusing on problems that are real problems in the world, like hunger or politics or whatever else. All right. But most importantly, it's about staying engaged with what we can control in life, which is most things if you really think about it. Anti fragile things need tension, resistance, adversity, and pain to break and transform. We get this by deeply commuting with life and being part of it, rather than fearing our emotions and sitting on the sidelines. You can't stay there forever, nor do you really want to do, nor do you really want to. Embracing the gift of it, of embracing the grit of it all was was what you were made for. Lean in and start living. Very cool. So talking about this thing of mental strength through challenges. So when you face challenges, you eventually develop and grow. That's nice. So let's see the next one. Mm, anti-fragile. Okay, now it's the next. Page 116 and 117. New change creates adjustment shock. Of all the things that nobody tells us about life that you might not experience instantaneously happiness after a positive life change is perhaps the most confusing. The truth about your psyche, actually like psyche, is this. Anything that is new, even if it is good, will feel uncomfortable until it is also familiar. So anything will be uncomfortable until it's not. Uh, okay. Until it is also familiar. Our brain works the opposite way too, in that whatever is familiar is what we perceive to be good and comfortable. Even if those behaviors, habits, or relationships are actually toxic or destructive. Positive life events can actually trigger depressive episodes. This happens for a few reasons. First, the spike and then decline in mood or attitude can exacerbate stress. Second, the expectation that a positive event will eliminate all stress and bring unprecedented happiness is a destructive one because the event rarely does that. This is why weddings, childbirth, or a new job can be so incredibly stressful. On top of being a massive life change, there's also this silent assumption that this should be a wholly, like wally, positive thing. And anxiety and tension should be eliminated. Wholly positive thing. Okay, should be a wholly positive thing, like a completely and entirely positive thing. And anxiety and tension should be eliminated. It's jarring to discover that it's jarring to discover this isn't the case. Overall, it comes down to the simple fact that any accomplishments, achievements, or life changes, no matter how positive, elicit change elicits stress. This is particularly true for those who are already predisposed to anxiety and depression. Because the concept of one's comfort zone is absolutely essential to stabilizing their mood. This is also why those people can often seem overwhelmingly particular or narrow minded. What are the signs of adjustment shock? Let's see how far we are from chapter 5. One second. Okay, it goes all the way down to 135. 135. Just want to see one thing. We are on page right now. we're here, 118. So we're talking about um, something like, I think we can do that. Let's go. Vamos. A gente vai completar uma hora de aula agorinha, daqui a pouco. Estou pensando seriamente em esticar a aula um pouco mais, finalizar o capítulo 5. Vamos nessa? Let's do it. Let's go. O capítulo 4, na verdade, chegar no 5. So let's go. What are the signs of adjustment shock? Adjustment shock can manifest as simply as increase in anxiety or irritability. However, it is often more complex than that. Let's take a picture. Okay. So adjustment shock often comes across as hypervigilance. If you make financial gains, your mind immediately shifts that to what could potentially derail your progress, a big bill that could come up, or the loss of a job you just got. If you have a new happy relationship, you could become paranoid about infidelity or lies. Adjustment shock can bring to light unconscious attachments and beliefs. If you are someone who was raised to think that wealthy people are morally corrupt, you are going to resist having more money. If you want it to be famous, to be uh, more loved, you're going to resist public success because famous people are often more criticized and disliked than the average person. Adjustment shock can bring feelings of intense fear. This is because when we attain something we very much care about or have worked towards for a long time, our instinct can be a shield, or instinct can be to shield ourselves from the potential loss of it by putting up walls and desensitizing ourselves to the experience. We often resist most deeply the things that we want most. This is because of adjustment shock, though we don't always know what's causing the resistance. It is scary to receive everything we want because it forces us to shift out of a survivalist, fear based mindset and into a more stabilized one. If all we are accustomed to is doing what we need to do to survive, when we're then confronted with the next phases of our self actualization. If we are no longer worried about basic survival, our minds are free to turn to the bigger question in life. What is our purpose? Have we lived meaningfully? Are we who we want to be? Good questions. We often think of big achievements as a get out of life easier card. They rarely are that. In fact, the opposite tends to happen. They level us up, force us into greater responsibilities, to think more deeply about big issues, to question ourselves and what we previously knew to be true. Big achievements actually pressure us to become increasingly better versions of ourselves. This is a net positive for our lives, but can be as uncomfortable as the struggling was, if not more so. So, how do I overcome adjustment shock? Good question. Let's take a screenshot of this and bring it down. Hmm. Here. There we go. No, that's on page 135. 20. It's actually 119 and 120. How do I overcome adjustment shock? When something positive happens in your life, you are going to have to adjust your mindset about other things to create alignment in a new, more accurate, and sustainable perspective. If you have anxiety about having more money, you will need to learn how to manage it better. If you have anxiety about relationships, you will need to learn to relate to others like you never have before. Your big life change is going to force you to level up in every way imaginable. And the way to overcome the initial fear of stepping into the unknown is to familiarize yourself with it, to make it a part of you. On that, you are certain you are prepared for and that you deserve. Psychic thinking isn't wisdom. Just see. Oops, missing the Y here. No. Psychic. Psychic. Just want to hear the word psychic. That's it. So psychic thinking isn't wisdom. When we talk about psychic thinking, we're not referring to the palm reading, neon sign advertisement, oculist professional you can hire to evaluate your energy and predict your future. Psychic thinking is far more insidious than that. Than that. Psychic thinking is assuming you know what somebody else is thinking or what they intend to do. It is assuming that the least likely outcome is the most viable outcome because you feel it most strongly. It is believing that you have missed out on another life, a path you did not choose, that you were possibly more meant for. It is believing that the person with whom you have the most electric connection is your most ideal life partner. Of course, the way the way other people see us in dynamic, their thoughts, feelings, and intentions are largely, if not entirely, unknown to us. The least likely outcome is just that, the least likely outcome. There is no such thing as the path we could have taken, only a projection of our needs and desires onto another fantastical idea of what our lives might be. Electric connections is not a soulmateship. Love and compatibility are not the same thing. Psychic thinking detaches us from reality. In place of logic, we put emotions, ones that are often incorrect, unreliable, and wholly biased towards what we want to believe. Beyond being inconveniencing, psychic thinking is absolutely terrible for your mental health. Psychic thinking breeds anxiety and depression. It's not just that something scares or upsets us, it's that we believe that the thought must not only be real, but predictive of future events. Instead of feeling like we are having a down day, psychic thinking makes us assume we're having a terrible life. We heard, trust yourself, and then become too likely to liken ourselves to oracles that when a particularly triggering thought or feeling passes through us, it must indicate something more to come. Indeed, psychic thinking as a whole has begun taking on an entirely new light because of the popularity of sorry, pop psychology dating back to the 50s or 60s. Trust yourself, the gurus tell you. Deep down, you know the truth. This is valid. Your intestines are literally connected to the steam of your brain. The bacteria in your stomach responds to subconscious intelligent awareness faster than your mind can. This is why your gut is indeed correct on instinct. But when this advice is given to people who cannot differentiate a gut feeling from fear or from a passing thought that is not bearing on reality or their lives as a whole, it becomes a dangerous practice in which they become completely stuck and limited because they assume their random feelings are all real. And then not only real, but a prediction for what's to come. Psychic thinking is nothing more than a series of cognitive biases, the most prominent of which are the following. Number one, confirmation. At any moment in time, your brain is inundated with stimuli to help you process. Your subconscious mind is aware of about 10% or of it or less. Your subconscious mind is still paying attention, logging away information you might one day need. However, what determines what makes it to the 10% of our conscious awareness has a lot to do with what we already believe. Our brains are literally working to filter out information that does not support our pre existing ideas. and then to draw our attention to information that does. This means we are subject to a confirmation bias, which is what we literally seek out and sort through stimuli that supports what we want to think. Extrapolation, polation, extrapolation. Extrapolation is when we take our current circumstances and then project them out into the future. Ryan Holiday says it best. This moment is not my life. It's a moment of my life. Extrapolation makes us think that we are the sum of our past or current experiences, that whatever stressors or anxieties we are currently experiencing are ones that we will grapple with for the rest of our lives. Unable to see through the problem at hand, we assume it will never resolve itself. Unfortunately, this can become a self fulfilling prophecy. If we are so easily defeated and exhausted by the idea that we will never get over our problems, then we make it more likely that we will hang onto them instead of logically trying to resolve them for a lot more time than is necessary. Spotlight. Everyone thinks that the world revolves around them. You are thinking about you and your own interests all day, every day. It can be challenging to forget that others are not thinking about us with such intensity. They're thinking about themselves. That's so good. Eu falo que todo mundo está preocupado com a sua vida, basicamente. Todo mundo acha que o mundo gira em torno de si. Porque a gente está o dia inteiro pensando sobre os nossos interesses e problemas e possibilidades. E é difícil, às vezes, a gente pensar que a outra pessoa não está pensando sobre a gente com tanta intensidade. Eles estão pensando sobre eles. The spotlight effect is what happens when we imagine that our lives are performative or on display for others to consume. 1 second. Okay. Cool. On others to consume. We remember that the last 2 or 3 embarrassing things we have done and imagine that others are thinking about them actively as well. Can you recall the last 2 or 3 embarrassing things someone else did? Of course you can't, because you aren't paying attention. Spotlight gives us the false impression that the world is all about us when it is not. These biases plus others, when combined with psychic thinking, or the idea that our assumption and feelings about the world will transpose into reality, are harmful and, most importantly, incorrect. Instead of trying to predict what will happen next, our energy is better used when it's focused intently on the moment, the infinite now, the mystic would say. Because the truth is that the past and the future are illusions in the present. And all we have is the present. Instead of trying to use your intelligence to hack what's next, try to get better at where you are currently. That's what that's what's really going to change the outcome of your life. Logical lapses are giving you profound anxiety. Okay, screenshot of this one. So let's see. Page 125. So let's go. Logical lapses are giving you profound anxiety. Most of the anxiety you experience in life is the result in inefficient, inefficient critical thinking skills. You might assume that because you are anxious, you are an overthinker, someone who obsesses about unlikely and scary outcomes more than is reasonable. The reality is that you are an underthinker. You're missing a part of your reasoning process. Let's start at the beginning. Anxiety is a normal emotion that every person experiences at some point in their lives, typically when circumstances are stressful, tense, or scary. When anxiety is chronic and begins to interfere with day to day functioning, it becomes a clinical disorder. We understand the importance of speaking about mental health with the same degree of legitimacy as physical health. However, in the same way that we would question what someone keeps tripping over if they repeatedly sprain their ankle, a lot of anxiety is similarly circumstantial as many illnesses are. Specifically, anxiety tends to be the result of an inability to process accurately stressful and ongoing circumstances. If we want to heal, we have to learn to process. This applies to everyone, not just those with diagnoses. On the hallmark of anxiety is rapid thinking. Because you are focusing on some issue so deeply and for so much time, you assume that you are also thinking through the issue thoroughly and arriving at the most likely conclusion. However, the opposite is happening. You're experiencing logical lapse. You're jumping to the worst case scenario because you aren't thinking clearly. And then you are engaging your fight or fight responses because the worst case scenario makes us feel threatened. This is why you obsesses this is why you obsesses about that one terrifying idea. Your body is responding as though it's an immediate threat. And until you defeat or overcome it, your body will do its job, which is to keep you in defense mode, which you really, which is really a heightened state of awareness to the enemy. But what is a logical lapse after all? Thinking of something that you aren't afraid of, maybe something that other people might find scary. Maybe you aren't afraid of flying in an airplane. Maybe people are. Maybe you aren't afraid of being single. Many people are. Maybe you aren't afraid of commitment. Many people are. Surely you can think of at least one thing in your life that you are truly afraid of. Why aren't you afraid of it? Because you don't have a logical lapse there. You can visualize yourself going on an airplane and successfully getting off without freaking out. You can visualize yourself being happy, single, or happily committed. Even if the worst were to happen, you can think a situation through in its entirely from exposition to climax to conclusion. You know what you would do. You have a plan. When you experience a logical lapse, the climax becomes the conclusion. You imagine as you imagine a situation, you figure that you would panic. And then because you're scared, you never think through the rest of the scenario. You never think about how you would get through it, what you would do to respond, and how you'd eventually move on with your life afterwards. If you were able to do this, you wouldn't be scared of it because you wouldn't think it had the power to end you. This is why exposure is the most common treatment for irrational fear. Listen again. This is why exposure is the most common treatment for irrational fear. By reintroducing this stressor into your life in a safe way, you're able to reestablish a line of thinking that is healthier and calmer. Basically, you prove to yourself that you prove to yourself that you will be okay, even if something scary does happen, which most often the time it does not. Either way, mental strength is not just hoping that nothing ever goes wrong. It is believing that we have the capacity to handle it if it does. Maybe you don't have the self belief yet. That's okay. It's not something you're born with, it's something you build slowly and over time. It's something you develop with practice by addressing small problems and then learning healthy coping mechanisms and effective reasoning skills. The thing is that there are millions of scary things that can happen to us in our lives that, if true for everyone, that is true for everyone. When we get hung up on one scary thing over another, it's not because it's a more imminent or likely threat. It is because we are less convinced we would be able to respond to it. To heal, we don't need to avoid it. We need to develop logic to see situations for what they are and respond appropriately to them. So often in life, our biggest anxiety comes from not comes not from what's actually happening, but how we think about what is happening. In fact, we reclaim our emotional freedom and power. Now let's go to faulty interference are holding you back from success. So let's see what's up with that one. Okay, didn't work. Screenshot. All right. 128. There we go. Faulty inferences in holding you back from success. Está quase lá. Falta essas daqui. Falta essas aqui que vocês estão vendo. Está indo até 35. Então falta 35, 34, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30. Está aqui, ó. There we go. If you are familiar with body typing, you'll probably be familiar with the term endomorphin, mesomorphin, and ectomorphin. Though everyone actually falls somewhere within the spectrum of these, meaning that everyone has varying degrees of each, the traits you defeat are typically your primary body type. If you've studied these types, you know that endomorphic bodies are often associated with increased fat retention. The assumption here is that these people have the worst metabolism, but that is false. Endomorphins actually have the best metabolisms of anyone. They are alive today because their ancestors adequately adapted to survive. Their metabolisms do precisely what they were intended to do: store fat for later use. Nice. So it's not just good right now. Okay. 1 second. Nice. So let's continue. Fat for later use. Something similar happens with highly intelligent people who experience high levels of anxiety. You assume that because these people are smart, they would be able to use logic to disrupt illogical fears. Logical lapses or an inability to adequately reason often generates anxiety. However, their brains are doing exactly what they were meant to do, with it to piece together unrelated stimuli and identify potential threats. Highly intelligent people have a psychological function others do not, which is the ability to infer. They can extract meaning and understanding from things that others simply take as face value. This is why people who have extremely high IQs often struggle with basic things such as social skills or driving a car, where others see the world as a one dimensional, The highly intelligent see it as three dimensional. They think more deeply than is often necessary. This gives them their ability to create, understand, strategize, and invent. In the same way that the endomorphins' excellent metabolism can work against them, so too can highly intelligent person's brain. This is because at times they make something called faulty inferences, which are when fallacies, biases, and incorrect assumptions are made from valid evidence. What's happening in your brain when you're very anxious is that you're taking an often innocuous stimulus and extracting some kind of meaning or prediction from it. When you're scared, your brain is working in overdriving to identify that thing that can potentially hurt you and then creatively come up with ways to completely avoid that experience. The smarter you are, the better you become at this. However, the more you avoid a fear, the more intense it becomes. What's a faulty inference? A faulty inference is when you come up with a faulty conclusion based on valid evidence. This means that your seeing, experiencing, and understanding might be real, but the assumptions that you are piercing together from it are either not real or are highly unlikely. One example is a hasty generalization, which is when you make a claim about an entire group of people based on one or two experiences you've had. This is the bias at the base of a lot of racism and prejudice. Another example is post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is what happens when you assume that because two things happened around the same time, they must be related, even if they're not, even if they aren't. A false dichotomy happens when you assume that there are only two possibilities that could be valid, when in reality there are four more than you simply aren't aware of. An example of this is when your boss calls you to a private meeting, you assume that it must either be getting a promotion or getting fired. A slippery slope to play off of that example is another false inference in which you assume that one event will set off a series of others, even if they certainly will not. These are just some of the myriad ways your brain can, in a scene, betray you. Though it intends to keep you alert and aware, sometimes the threat becomes overinflated, unable to decipher the difference. Your body responds regardless. How do I correct this? Correcting faulty inferencing begins with first being aware that you're doing it. In the majority of cases, once you realize that you're thinking in a false dichotomy or making a hasty generalization, you stop doing it. You understand what it is and you let it go. Training your brain to stop doing it automatically takes time. Think of it Think of your mind like a search engine that autofills your terms. If it's something you've input many times over the years, it is still going to come up for a while. You have to work on consistently adding new thoughts, opinions, and stimuli to shift what it comes up with naturally. This is not only possible, it's inevitable. What you consistently do is what you adapt to. Your brain will start to reorient your comfort zone, and eventually it will feel as natural to think logically as it once did to think dramatically. It will feel as natural to become as it does now to feel anxious. It takes awareness and it takes time, but it is always possible. Worrying is the weakest defense system. Rumination is the birthplace of creativity. They're controlled by the same part of the brain. That's the neurological reason there is a stereotype about depressed creatives. Any artist will tell you that the toughest times in their lives inspired the most groundbreaking work. What they won't tell you though is that crisis is not necessary to function. Well, of course it's not. You're thinking crisis is the worst case scenario. And yet, how many of us place ourselves in a state of panic over fear of that least likely scenario coming true? How many of us, in an effort to shield ourselves from panic, actually create a crisis out of fear each day? We are not just masochists, we're widely intelligent, unconsciously functioning beings. Our brain understands something. If we imagine our worst fears, we can prepare for them. If we mold them over and over again, we can feel protected in a way. If we're ready for the storm, it can't hurt us, except it can. Worrying excessively is not a malfunction. You're not of lesser character because you can't stop and enjoy life. Worrying is a subconscious defense mechanism. It's what we do when we care about something. So much we are equally terrified that it couldn't hurt us. So we prepare to fight for it. What is the exact opposite of our fear? That's what you want. That's what you want so much that you'd go to the ends of your sanity to defend it. There's nothing wrong with you thinking this way, but there's also nothing wrong with you being ready to move in a new direction. The reality is that worrying does not protect us in the way that we think it might. We cannot beat fear to the finish line. Worry sensitizes us to an infinite of negativity possibilities, possible outcomes. It shifts our mindset to accept, seek out, and create worst case scenario. If a crisis were to occur, we would start panicking because our brains and bodies had been preparing for this epic war for a long time. Just take a screenshot of this one. There we go. Page 132. Back where we were. Except again. We're here. If a crisis were to occur, we would start panicking because our brains and bodies had been preparing for this epic war for a long time. Had we not premeditated these fears so excessively, we wouldn't be as impacted were they to actually happen, where they to actually happen. We would see the situation for what it is and respond accordingly. That's where the nasty cycles for. Once we worry ourselves sick over something that is totally delusional and it doesn't happen because, of course, it was never going to. We start to associate worry with safety. See, I thought this through so many times that I've avoided it, but that's not what's happening at all. Just telling someone to stop worrying and be present strengthens their impulse to be fearful because you are effectively asking them to place their guard down. Making yourself feel more vulnerable when you're already at your edge is not the answer. Instead, you have to find a different way to feel safe. Rather than spend your time rehearsing how much you would panic if such and such situation were to come to fruition, imagine how a third party would handle it if they were in your shoes. Imagine getting to the other side of the issue, perhaps even threatening, even treating it as an opportunity to create something you otherwise couldn't. Rather than spending your time shrinking yourself in your life out of fear of potentially confronting some kind of hardship, work on developing your self esteem and know that even if you were to fail, you wouldn't be judged, exiled, or hated in the way you fear. Rather than spending your life trying to identify the next thing to worry about and then overcome, learn to move into a new pattern of thinking in which you recognize that you don't need to balance out the bad with the good to live a full and fairy life. Stability and wholeness, health and vitality are your bright birthright. You are allowed to have everything you want. You are permitted to be at peace. Worry is so primal in the way that it fulfills a deep need within us to feel as though we've conquered and thus are protected and saved. Yet, at the same time, our discomfort with it is a higher aspect of ourselves, informing us that it isn't necessary, and in fact, it's holding us back from the people we want and are meant to be. There is a better way to feed your emotional hunger, and it's not frightening yourself for your own inner peace. Nice. And that's chapter 4, Então, nós concluímos o capítulo 4 do livro, The Mountain is You. As far as I know, então, até onde eu sei, ele vem até aqui, até o... Falta o capítulo 5. Vamos ver aqui, ó. References. A gente está na página 135. Acho que ele vem até o capítulo 7. Então nós teremos possivelmente mais 3 semanas nele para ler o capítulo 5, 6 e o 7, provavelmente. E aí nós tentaremos o máximo fazer um capítulo por semana, porque nós estamos preparando um novo formato de aulas, inclusive por isso que a leitura está sendo bem dinâmica, inclusive está sendo mais produtiva, assim, eu estou sentindo que vocês estão conseguindo ser mais desafiados e também aprender mais, o que é muito bom. Então está sendo bem produtivo aqui, é isso mesmo. Então é no capítulo 7 que ele vai. Então falta o 6 e o 7. Alright, so thank you guys very much for watching and for being here. If you have any questions, please let me know. Se tiverem qualquer dúvida, please let me know. Thank you so much. Muitíssimo obrigado. Take care. And I'll see you in the next one. I'll see you in the next book class, the one before the last, on chapter 5. Take care, and I'll see you. Bye-bye.